All right, so get this. Today's deep dive, we're heading straight into science fiction territory. But the thing is, it could actually be science fact. What if instead of fighting viruses tooth and nail, we could just be like, hey, virus, you did a great job. You can relax now.
Yeah, it does have a sort of movie-like ring to it, doesn't it? But there's a really fascinating biological basis for this idea. It's called a viral self-regulation.
Viral self-regulation.
Yeah.
So for those of us who haven't randomly stumbled upon that term in our everyday lives, what does that actually mean?
Well, it basically means that certain types of viruses have this kind of built-in mechanism that limits how much they replicate, like an internal off switch that stops them from completely destroying their host cell too quickly.
So it's kind of like the virus knows that if it goes too crazy, it's going to kill its own home.
Yeah.
And then it'll have nowhere to live.
Exactly. It's all about survival for the virus. And that's why researchers are so intrigued by this whole concept. What if we could figure out how to tap into that viral off switch? Could we actually gain control over infections by basically telling the virus, mission accomplished, you're done?
Whoa, hold on a second. That's a pretty massive leap. You're saying we could basically manipulate viruses just by understanding how they regulate themselves and get them to stop replicating.
That's the big idea. And it's opening up some seriously revolutionary research avenues. What we're going to explore in our deep dive today is how scientists are taking this knowledge of viral self-regulation and merging it with cutting-edge therapies to potentially completely change how we fight diseases forever.
I am so in. So where do we even start with something like this? How do we begin to understand this whole viral off-switch thing?
Well, one of the key starting points is to get a grasp on how our own healthy cells communicate. They use these things called bioelectric signals. It's almost like they have these tiny electrical conversations happening constantly throughout our body.
Oh, yeah. I remember learning about that. So are you saying we could use these bioelectric signals to actually talk to the virus, or at least to the infected cell?
Exactly. Imagine if we could amplify those bioelectric signals in a way that sends like a red alert message to the infected cell, telling it, hey, the virus needs to chill out.
Okay, that's a brilliant analogy. But how do we actually boost those signals? What kind of tools would we be using?
There are a few therapies out there that seem promising, like red light therapy and PEMF therapy. That stands for pulsed electromagnetic field therapy.
Red light therapy. That's interesting. I know people use that for their skin, but how does that tie into fighting off viruses?
Red light therapy actually has a way bigger impact than just skin benefits. It can stimulate energy production inside the cells, specifically in those tiny powerhouses we call mitochondria.
Ah, mitochondria, the energy factories of the cell. So you're saying that if we give the cell more energy, it can fight back against the virus better.
That's the idea. It's like giving the cell a fuel injection to supercharge its defenses and really blast out that red alert message.
That makes a lot of sense. And what about PEMF therapy? How did that fit into all of this?
PEMF is super fascinating because it uses specific electromagnetic pulses to directly influence the electrical properties of the cells. Remember those bioelectric signals we were talking about?
The red alert messages, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
PEMF could potentially make those signals stronger and clearer, almost like turning up the volume on that red alert so the infected cell can't miss it.
Okay. I'm starting to see how all of these therapies could work together in this whole puzzle. But I'm also really curious about something you mentioned earlier, structured water. What's the connection there?
Structured water. Now, this is where things get really mind-blowing. It's like water that holds information almost like it has a memory.
Wait, hold on. Water with a memory. How is that even possible? I think I need a little bit more explanation on that one.
I know it's a complex idea, but basically the way the water molecules are arranged can impact how they interact with cells. And some researchers believe that this arrangement can actually carry information. The idea is that structured water could help cells remember important stuff, like the viral threshold we've been talking about.
Okay, so you're saying that by giving cells this structured water, we could be helping them remember when the virus has reached its limit.
That's the theory. It's kind of like how our own bodies learn to avoid things that have made us sick before. We develop a memory of those bad experiences, and our immune system gets better at recognizing and fighting those threats the next time around. We're trying to achieve something similar at the cellular level.
Wow, that is pretty amazing. So by combining all these therapies, the red light, PEMF, and this incredible structured water, we could potentially be boosting a cell's ability to communicate, defend itself, and even remember how to fight off a virus.
That's the big picture, yeah. And the implications of all this are pretty incredible.
Well, I'm definitely all ears.
Yeah.
What are the implications? How could this impact our immune system as a whole?
Think about it. If we can improve the way individual cells talk to each other and respond to threats, Imagine the impact that could have on our immune system's ability to spot and get rid of viruses even before they cause any real harm.
So we're not just talking about treating infections after the fact. We could actually be preventing them altogether. That's a pretty big deal, isn't it?
Exactly. It's a totally different way of looking at how we deal with viral infections. Instead of always being on the defensive, we could be proactively making our bodies stronger and more responsive to threats.
Okay, so this is all super exciting.
Mm.
But let's get down to brass tacks. What kind of results are scientists actually seeing with this whole approach?
Well, based on the current research and the theoretical models, the potential outcomes are pretty amazing. We're talking about a possible 70 to 80% decrease in viral replication.
Hold on a sec. You're saying we could reduce how much a virus replicates by up to 80%. That's huge EE. Imagine if you could just bounce back from a cold in a day instead of a whole week, because
Yeah.
the virus couldn't spread as easily.
It's definitely significant. And it doesn't stop there. We're also looking at a possible 85 to 90% improvement in the immune response.
Wow. So our immune system could get that much better at fighting off viruses. That's incredible.
And to top it all off, research suggests a potential 75 to 85% reduction in the amount of damage to the body's own tissues.
So not only are we stopping the virus dead in its tracks, but we're also shielding our bodies from the damage it can cause. This is revolutionary stuff. And it all goes back to tapping into our body's own incredible power to heal and protect itself. It does make you wonder, though, are there any downsides to this approach? What about ethical considerations?
You're absolutely right. We need to look at all sides of the coin. Like with any new and emerging field, we have to tread carefully. One of the biggest hurdles is that we're still in the very early stages of understanding how viral self-regulation actually works and how we can manipulate it without any risks. It's a really complex system with tons of moving parts, and there's always the possibility of unintended consequences.
So it's like we're trying to fine-tune this super delicate instrument. We need to make sure we don't accidentally mess the whole thing up.
Exactly. For example, if we accidentally go overboard and overstimulate certain cellular pathways, we could unintentionally create an environment where the virus actually thrives or mutates into something even more dangerous.
Okay, so it's not as simple as just flipping a switch and everything magically works perfectly. We need a really deep understanding of the underlying biology to ensure we're not causing more harm than good.
Absolutely. And that brings us to those ethical considerations. If we're talking about manipulating cellular processes and potentially even changing the course of viral evolution, we got to be super careful about how we move forward. We don't want to create problems down the line that we didn't see coming.
What kind of ethical concerns are we talking about specifically?
Well, one of the biggest concerns is the potential for those unintended consequences we were just talking about. We need to make absolutely sure that any interventions we develop are thoroughly tested and proven to be safe before they're used on a wider scale.
That makes perfect sense. We definitely don't want to fix one problem only to create another even bigger one down the road.
Another really important ethical point is the issue of access and equity. If these therapies end up being super expensive or difficult to administer, they could actually make existing health disparities even worse. We need to ensure that everyone benefits from these advancements, not just a select few.
Absolutely. Equal access to healthcare is so important. It's great that researchers are keeping these ethical considerations in mind as they move forward with their work.
It's crucial for scientists to be having open conversations and to really think carefully about the potential impact of these groundbreaking discoveries.
So while this viral self-regulation approach has a ton of potential, there are definitely some serious challenges and ethical things to sort out. But even with those potential downsides, it's tough not to get excited about the possibilities, especially when we start talking about the intersection of this research with quantum biology.
Ah, yes, quantum biology. This is where things get extra interesting. It's a field that's starting to show us just how deeply the quantum world is connected to life itself.
Okay, I gotta admit the term quantum biology always makes me feel a little intimidated. Can you break it down for us? What exactly is quantum biology, and how does it relate to everything we've been discussing about viruses and cellular communication?
In a nutshell, quantum biology is the study of how those mind-blowing principles that govern the subatomic world, things like quantum mechanics, actually play a role in biological processes.
Wait, are you telling me that the same principles that control the behavior of tiny particles like electrons and photons also have an impact on living things? That's wild.
It might sound strange, but the evidence is definitely piling up. For a long time, scientists thought that quantum effects were too fragile and short-lived to have any real impact on the complex world of biology. You know, quantum mechanics is usually associated with those super tiny particles and weird phenomena that happen at incredibly low temperatures.
Right, always seemed like something that belonged in a physics lab, not inside our bodies.
Exactly. But it turns out that life has found some super clever ways to use these quantum phenomena to its advantage, even at room temperature and within the super busy environment of a living cell.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so how does all this tie back into viruses and cellular communication? You mentioned it was connected.
Well, one of the most exciting areas where quantum biology is making waves is in our understanding of how cells talk to each other. Remember those bioelectric signals we were discussing earlier, the ones we've been calling the red alert system?
Yes, the signals that cells use to communicate with each other, right?
Exactly. Well, those signals might actually be influenced by quantum phenomena in ways we're only just starting to grasp.
Okay, I think I need a little more help on this one. How could something as seemingly large as a bioelectric signal be affected by the quantum world? It feels like such a huge jump in scale.
Think about it this way. Those bioelectric signals involve the movement of electrons, those tiny subatomic particles that are governed by the laws of quantum mechanics. And we already know that electrons can act in some pretty bizarre ways, exhibiting properties like superposition and entanglement.
Superposition and entanglement. Okay, those words definitely take me back to my high school physics class,
Yeah.
and not in a good way. Can you remind us what those are again?
Sure. So superposition is the idea that a particle can exist in multiple states at the same time. It's like flipping a coin. It's both heads and tails until it lands. Entanglement, on the other hand, is when two particles get linked together, even if they're super far apart. It's like they have this invisible connection. So whatever happens to one particle immediately affects the other one.
Okay, I'm starting to remember this now. It's pretty mind-blowing to think about, especially when we're talking about something as intricate as a living cell. So you're saying that these quantum properties, superposition and entanglement, could be involved in how cells talk to each other.
That's exactly what some researchers are thinking. And if they're right, it opens up a whole new world of possibilities for understanding and even manipulating cellular communication.
So instead of just thinking about those electrical signals traveling along nerves, we're actually dealing with a much more complex and subtle form of communication happening at the quantum level.
Precisely. It's like uncovering the secret language that our cells use, one that operates on a completely different set of rules than we ever thought possible.
This is incredible. But I have to ask, how does this quantum communication actually work in practice? What are the mechanisms involved? I need some solid examples to really get my head around all of this.
Well, that's where things get a bit more theoretical, but we're still in the very early stages of figuring this all out. But there are some really intriguing theories starting to emerge.
I'm all ears. Let's hear those theories. I'm ready to go even deeper down this quantum rabbit hole.
One theory that's gaining traction involves this concept of quantum coherence. It's the idea that groups of particles can act in sync, like a perfectly choreographed dance team. And some scientists think this coherence could be how cells actually sense and react to their surroundings, including, those pesky viruses we've been talking about.
So it's like all the cells are working together like a team, communicating and coordinating their moves through this intricate quantum dance. That's such a cool way to picture it.
It is a fascinating idea, and it's really interesting. This coherence could actually be influenced by things like light electromagnetic fields and even the way water molecules are structured.
Wait, are you serious? You're telling me things like light and water can actually have an effect on this quantum coherence within cells? That's kind of blowing my mind right now.
It is pretty remarkable. And remember earlier when we were talking about red light therapy and structured water? Well, those therapies could be working at least partially by influencing the quantum coherence within cells.
So you're saying that by shining red light on cells or giving them structured water, we could actually be boosting their ability to communicate on a quantum level. It's like giving them a superpowered cell phone.
That's a fantastic analogy. It's like we're enhancing their ability to chat and coordinate their actions. And that could have a